WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively back into the March groove and all things Lamar and more Lamar. But we'll be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour on April 5th in my homeland of Dundalk. We're going to be at Costas Inn. I'm going to be giving away these fantastic instant scratch offs. They look, Luke's mom will remember these because these were old school and they came out like many, many years ago, back in the 70s. 50 years of doing the Maryland Lottery. Our friends at Window Nation putting us out on the road as well. 866-90 Nation. I will have the floppy hat on April 5th, honoring Costas for being one of the original purveyors of all things Maryland Lottery tickets back in 1973. I'm wearing my Drug City shirt, Dundalk, Maryland, 1954, and they also were original lottery purveyors. We had a great conversation with my dear friend Calvin Sadie. We'll be coming back down to the fountain down there in the tasting room. But, Luke's never been to Drug City, so at some point, dude, when I go back to Drug City, you're coming and doing a segment with me at Drug City. You're gonna have to, because I want to show you my neighborhood. You've shown me all around your little league and your home run fences. And by the way, we're gonna do a football segment here. I came up to your homeland over the weekend, and I have some show and tell for this segment that I'm going to break out here at some point, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun. I have show and tell for the baseball part of the segment, for the football part of the segment as well, because I went antiquing in Shrewsbury, Pennsylvania, at the behest of my son and his daughter, who sent me up there looking for my Pacifica belt buckles. And all I found was some old Baltimore Sun things with John Stedman and a whole bunch of old Clippers stuff. And then I went to State College, Luke, football capital of the Big Ten, or at least they think so. They were independent for a long time. And I ran into Ross Tucker, who gave me some peachy paterno at the Bruce Springsteen concert. And the only thing he wanted to know, and I think he was lubricated, if you know what I'm saying. It was prior to a show. All he wanted to know is, hey, what's up with Lamar? What's going on with Lamar, man? You want some ice cream? Let's talk about Lamar. And I'm thinking, man, it's stretched all the way to Princeton and State College, this Lamar thing. So I want to give it to you, Luke. What's going on with Lamar?
Well, to quote the great Bill Murray in one of his films, well, it's Groundhog Day again. I mean, what's going on with Lamar? It's what's been going on for weeks and months and years even. Maybe not quite, maybe not quite that dramatic with the fully guaranteed contract thing. But look, we talked about it going into the start of the new league year when we knew that the Ravens were officially placing a franchise tag on him, whether it was going to be the exclusive one, which would have been 45 million around there, thereabouts, or whether it's the non-exclusive, which was 32 million. We said that the Ravens were going to be in a tough position here, not just because of that cap number, because 32.4 million is not exactly prohibitive as it pertains to franchise quarterbacks and cap dollars and things of that nature. But when it comes to maintaining flexibility to match a potential offer sheet from another team, whether that's going to come or not, is another debate. But you have to be prepared for
Smith
that.
is wondering
And
too.
that's where we find right. But that's where we find the Ravens at this point, where we're a week into the negotiating period, at least, and certainly almost a week into the official signing period. And the Ravens are one of only two teams, the Jaguars being the other one, that finished the weekend with having not signed an outside free agent. That's where the Ravens find themselves right now. They've lost some guys. They've re-signed some guys. They certainly have a number of free agents that they are still talking to of their own that could still come back. I think, one name I'll throw out there, Marcus Peters. You look at the cornerback market, it hasn't been lucrative. So someone on the wrong side of 30, someone who's now a year plus removed from an ACL injury, probably not a lucrative deal out there for him. So have they increased their chances of bringing him back? Sure, I would say, but you keep coming back to the Ravens need to maintain flexibility here. And you and I have debated this a lot in terms of whether Lamar was going to be back or not. And look, I'm not saying it's 100% that he's returning, but at the same time, you've seen the veteran quarterback market disappear, right? I mean, guys have found homes, and we've talked about which teams have signed a veteran quarterback and say, okay, well, that seems to take them out of the Lamar market. But as you and I have talked about, whether the Ravens work out something long term or not, each day that passes feels like it's more and more likely Lamar Jackson's going to be the Ravens quarterback, at least this year. And we'll see what happens from there. But
And the Ravens will
beyond
have
that,
no motivation to give him $120 million now, right? Like it's 32, you play or you don't play, right? I mean, I don't know
well,
where the hard ball in all of this is, where you're hardballing the kid you're expecting to lead your team, who's been an on again and off again leader from the very beginning, and is like, I don't know how. I keep going back to Dennis, like, how can they kiss and make up, and how could this be happy with the Ravens? Other than the fan base, Lamar's out dancing, partying, people bringing their selfies and like whatever. Like I'm watching, seeing all this stuff and thinking, if he's not sitting with Jim Irsay now, when? If
yeah,
there's the,
sure.
if he's not looking to get another gig right now, like as the market dries up, to your point, like Tampa, Atlanta, the Carolina, these teams that have other chairs that were in our chairs back in November, December, and the chairs of all the internet out there, and in DeMaurice Smith's mind and in Lamar Jackson's agent's mind, these teams would all be out there. Man, we're post St. Patrick's Day. All the early money's gone. A lot of teams don't have that kind of cap room laying around, and we had predicted that with Tampa and some other places where maybe he thought he'd get a good tax situation. That Miami obviously valued a cornerback. These teams have valued other things other than Lamar Jackson. And I guess in his mind, everybody was going to make Lamar number one when the Ravens were the only one willing to make him number one 5 years ago. And now that he's hitting the market, who's going to make him their priority? And this is fascinating to watch, dude. It's unbelievable, really. And that's why Ross Tucker's bringing it up with me 10 minutes before Springsteen's hitting the stage over some Peachy Paterno.
Yeah. Well, the one thing you said that I'll push back on a little bit is he's not really hitting the market because you know what he wants, right? He wants a fully guaranteed deal. And oh, yeah, you need to give up 2 first-round picks. So teams like Miami who don't have a first-round pick, even if they deep down they wanted to move on from Tua, you can't do it until after the draft. So we've said this all along, and this is why it's frankly frustrating when you see the talking head shows on the ESPN and what have you, where people just keep saying, "Well, they need to go get Lamar." It's like, okay, well, it's not that simple. He's not a unrestricted free agent where you just sign him and that's that, right? There's so many layers to this that speak to it being much more complicated. His demands, draft compensation, the idea that you could go down the road and sign an offer sheet with him and just think, hey, we got a chance. And then the Ravens just say, okay, we'll match that. We'll match that. We're not we're not just going to give away our franchise quarterback, and we actually feel like whatever the offer sheet hypothetically would be. And again, whether Lamar's going to even sign an offer sheet that wouldn't be fully guaranteed, that's certainly at least a strong debate. Whether that would even be a reality, there's a lot to it. So, what you said in terms of teams not making him their top priority, look, I mean, he's not an unrestricted free agent. There's a lot more to it. So that's when you look at each team's individual situation. And to me, going into last Wednesday, when teams at 4 p.m. on the 15th, when they could officially start talking to him, putting aside agent, the lack of an agent and all the other factors, there was still the sense of who was going to make sense, all those different variables that we've mentioned over and over and over, who kind of lines up. And at the time, I kind of thought it was Indianapolis, based on the fact that they had cleared some cap space and they hadn't made a lot of signings. Could it still be them? Sure. But each day that passes, you just wonder, I mean, is there going to be a team that's going to be able to create enough cap room? Or are they going to have to cut? Theoretically, they'd have to cut so many different players. And then it's like, all right, you get Lamar, but what's the rest of your roster look like? So there's just a lot to it. And that's where I look at it from the standpoint of each day passing. It feels more and more likely that, it's kind of the Ravens or who for him right now. Now, Lamar Jackson and DeMaurice Smith and Lamar's camp and anyone else who's advising him at this point could say in a big picture sense, well, you go the Kirk Cousins route or, Dak Prescott playing on the tag. I mean, it's not, it's not unheard of that a player would do it. I mean, Cousins did it, played on the tag 2 years and eventually got to market. And that's when he got his 3-year fully guaranteed deal. So, but the problem is if you're Lamar Jackson is still a lot of time until you can do that. You know, you're still 2 years away from that. So what
By the
happens
way,
in the
did you see
meantime?
the numbers that Josh Allen, the money he's made versus what
Yeah,
Lamar would make if he plays?
sure. Yeah, I mean, Lamar's the money that he's missed out on over the last 2 years. I don't know how you're going to get that back. Even if you get a fully guaranteed deal, I don't know how you're getting that back at this point. I mean, that's what's so difficult for him.
And it
So,
would be different if he had two Super Bowls under his wing.
well,
Instead, he's got two incomplete grades at the end of these 2 years. In addition, that works against him for anybody to sign him. For anybody to sign him, he's got two incompletes when he was betting on two deep runs and my value and being the number one. He is not the best quarterback in the National Football League. And I know you're higher on him than I am and probably always have been because of the style, but nobody's stepping up in the way that they all couldn't get out of their own way for Deshaun Watson. And you talk about the trade part, the 2 picks and whatever in Miami and this and that. I want to say this because I haven't said this because I haven't had an opportunity to say this because he's only been on the market for half a week, right? If you love that kid and you think that kid's your quarterback and you think you're going to win a championship with that kid in the next 3 to 5 years, and you would be on the phone with Eric DeCosta right now saying, what do we have to give him and what do we have to give you? Let's figure, you're like, if we love the kid, if you love the kid, to
yeah,
Tyler Heineke, who did the Tampa get? Tampa got somebody, right? Who did Tampa sign?
the Tampa
Jeff Garcia. I don't know. Yeah, I'm
Jeff
making that up.
Garcia
No, but I mean,
caught
whatever.
me off guard. I wasn't thinking about that.
No, I'm not thinking about it either because they signed somebody they can't win with. You know, so like I don't even remember who it was. Jameis Winston somewhere. But that was yesterday in Tampa. But
They
if you
signed
love
Baker.
Baker, thank you.
Yeah.
They can't win.
So
So
I knew that. It just I
so
wasn't
did
thinking about the
I.
Tampa
So
Bay
did I.
Buccaneers
And
at the
I'm not
moment.
looking to embarrass either one of us on our trivial knowledge of what quarterbacks and what hot chair. It's either you can win or you can't. And if this is the week where if Mr. Big shot white owner, wherever he is on his plane, on his boat, and then the general manager and the coach are like, we got Baker Mayfield or we could get Lamar Jackson. We have Tua or whatever their situation is, or we have the number 1 pick, or we could go get Lamar Jackson. Last year it was Deshaun Watson, bright, shiny objects, as I talked to Dennis about selling cars and Pacifica belt buckles and, all of that. The bright, shiny object here, Lamar thought he would be the bright, shiny object. And call it collusion, call it whatever you want. Like, I mean, they're all spending $240 million in cap money. So they're all spending the money. Now, who they spend it on, whatever, and how they collude against quarterbacks. But I don't think they're going to go to market with a guaranteed deal for a guy who's got 2 incomplete grades, who now teams are deciding they'd rather have Baker Mayfield than give up half a draft or 2 drafts and give him too much money or more than Eric and Steve who love him and John who love him, we're going to give him. And like, it's fascinating. And I guess this is why I had Peter King on last week, right? To your point, I had Aaron Schatz on last week.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about anything else. Like, I think they all get 2 minutes on their respective shows unless they write a column about it. This thing's so complex that Peter King and I did 32 minutes on it and didn't get a breath on anything else because he had a lot he wanted to say because there's just so much to say about all of this.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm fatigued beyond belief talking about Lamar Jackson. I think national guys, it's a little bit different because they're covering the rest of the league. But I mean, look, let's also be clear here. Other teams making these decisions, like let's not give these other teams that much credit either. Like the Buccaneers aren't winning anything with Baker Mayfield. I mean, come on now. so at the same time, let's also not give all these teams too much credit that they look at the set of variables and say, oh, we're making the smart decision. There are some teams that absolutely should be in on Lamar Jackson, quite frankly. But
there's one 37 miles away.
Laid out.
There's one right down the street that he would make them instantly better.
Well, but we've been saying the Washington Commanders football team slash blank skins have we've been talking about them making bad decisions for 25 years at this point in time. So, there's that. But, you mentioned Deshaun Watson. Let's be clear here, though. There was interest in Deshaun Watson of multiple teams until the Cleveland Browns offered a fully guaranteed deal. And then how much interest was there? One, a team that had already been eliminated from contention. And those other teams that were trying to sign him, some of them still need a quarterback, but we go back to the fully guaranteed ask. And that's where this thing continues to be at its impasse. The impasse that the Ravens and Lamar have had for a year now, a year plus. And the rest of the league looking at this and saying, I'd like to talk theoretically, hypothetically, I'd like to talk to the kid, but if that's his asking point and the Ravens haven't even been able to negotiate with him because that's what he's wanted. They've tried and he really hasn't been willing to negotiate. I mean, I think that seems to be apparent at this point. Look, he has his asking price and that's that. And he has the right to do that. But if you're that other team who doesn't have a rapport with him, he doesn't have an agent. So communication is an issue, draft compensation, the fact that he's had some injuries over the last couple of years as it pertains to a fully guaranteed deal. I don't think Lamar Jackson being injured at the end of each of the last 2 years disqualifies teams from being interested at all. But I think it does certainly make them take some major pause as it pertains to a fully guaranteed contract. Absolutely. I think the Ravens felt that way. If Lamar had taken the Ravens to the Super Bowl last year or this year, or he had won another MVP this past season, I don't think we'd be talking about this. I think they would feel that we don't really have a choice. This is Joe Flacco post Super Bowl 47 again. I think they'd have no leverage, and that would be that. They'd have to pay him. But it hasn't worked out that way, so that's where this is more complicated. So what you have is the Ravens being in this holding pattern where they have, started the second week, let's call this a second week of free agency at this point in time, with around $8 million in cap space. Now, they have a number of players that they can restructure contracts and create more cap space as needed. So they're just kind of in a holding pattern, waiting and seeing if there's going to be a team that steps up and sniffs around Lamar Jackson. At this point, who is that team? Again, we've talked about Indy. I saw some national reporters over the weekend speculating a little bit about a team like a New England, but that doesn't feel Patriot-like, quite frankly. And again, so many of these teams have already spent free agent dollars elsewhere that you just look at it and say, from a cap standpoint, from a contract structure standpoint, how feasible would it be? So, in the same way we talked about, the Miami Dolphins don't have a first-round pick. The San Francisco 49ers don't have a first-round pick. So they can't even talk to Lamar until after the draft as it pertains to him being on the tag and an offer sheet. So, that's where you just kind of go through the list and you just start disqualifying teams for any number of reasons. The teams that have a franchise quarterback certainly aren't going to be in on him. Teams that have signed another veteran quarterback, at least in like the Jimmy Garoppolo bracket, and above, they're not signing Lamar Jackson. Whether they made a good choice or not with the guy they chose instead is debatable, but it's what they did.
Yeah, well, the Saints and the Raiders, they have guys in those chairs now, right? Like, the chairs are getting full.
I mean,
his agent didn't see this, and his agent and he were out clubbing over the weekend. And I'm thinking to myself, if you're not on the plane now, when, right? I mean, the money's going away. Where's the interest in him? They're screaming collusion, but we're trying to, as journalists, put the pieces together because believe me, these are dastardly men who own these teams. So, like, I have no thoughts about their integrity or their ethics. I've seen it at work. But all that being said, how this is going to play out, where he's going to go in quarterback, and what the circumstance would be here if he comes back again, plays for $32 million, doesn't show up in the offseason. We don't hear from his agent. All we do is see these bits and pieces of this guy playing video games and living a millionaire's life and kind of having a good time in the offseason. Give me the popcorn. I'm like Michael Jackson in Thriller is what I'm like, Luke,
Yeah, I mean, look, him going to concerts and stuff like that, I mean, that's not.
No, but this week, his agent would be out trying to get him a deal desperately right now.
Oh, of course. Well, but the agent would be doing the groundwork for that, and there is no agent, so sure. No, I hear you.
So then there's nothing happening. If he's not on the plane to here or there or there or they're not, then there's really nothing. Nobody's giving him money without meeting him. I've
of
met
course.
these men.
Well, but it also comes down to if his starting point is more than what teams are willing to do, and then there's a draft compensation, and then there's the lack of an agent, and then there's talking about the injury, and then there's talking about you know restructuring your off. Again, all these variables start to pile up, and that's where teams have clearly said, well, we're going to go in a different direction.
Dude, if I wanted $150 million from Jim Irsay, I'd be on a plane to Indianapolis and sitting in his office and telling him what I could do to help his football team.
Well, but
I mean,
150
I
million, that's
represent
not the
myself,
cost, though.
Luke. This isn't hard.
That's
I mean,
but
really.
that's not the asking price. He wants more than that. So
Okay.
that's where.
Well, then he's not getting on the plane, and Jim Irsay's not getting on the plane, and he's going to have to come back and play for $32 million with his tail between his legs. And I don't think that's good for as good as Ravens fans think that is for them. I don't think that's good for them. And as much as Kevin Byrne used to preach to me and all the Ravens brass would say, we like a pissed off football player that wants to go earn his money. We like him pissed off. I don't think that this is good for them.
What? Let me ask specifically, but why is this different than Terrell Suggs playing on the tag back in 2008? Why is this different than
because I think he's your quarterback, and I think there was questions last year about his business decisions and not. I think there are bruised feelings, and I think that.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm just asking why that can't work. Look, let me be clear.
I think bruised feelings with your franchise players not good ever, 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 ever.
I don't disagree with you, but my point is, what's the alternative?
I guess they're all going to have to ask themselves that, right?
I mean, I'm just, you're not just going to just, they're not just going to let him go.
That's what Jim Irsay may know and think he's done there. He's going to play somewhere else, and he's got to be my guy, and I'm going to get my price, especially a draft compensation. You know what I mean? So I don't.
But the Ravens, see, that's where I disagree with you. I don't see the Ravens. Why would the Ravens be motivated to move Lamar Jackson at a less than optimal price? I mean, say what you want about him. He's an extraordinary asset. This guy's won a lot of football games. Again,
I don't disagree, but I don't know what an asset he is if he's going to show up in August and be an ass hat instead of an ass head and not be.
But he has plenty of motivation.
He's never done that, but
play well. But he has extraordinary motivation to play well, also, right? Now, that doesn't mean I think he's showing up for OT. I mean, he didn't show up for OTAs last year. They're voluntary, and he's not even under contract at this point in time. So. How important are OTAs? How important is the first 2 weeks of training camp?
How important is the advice he's getting and who he's getting it from? That's really.
I don't disagree, but I'm trying to live in reality here, though.
Reality says he's going to come play football, and John and Eric believe that probably too. Yeah. And how is that going to turn out, and how uncomfortable and awkward is that going to be? Well, dude, you're a professional. You're getting paid $2 million this week to quarterback my team.
Yeah.
Get your ass in the meetings. That's the way it has to be. If it can't be that way and he can't be happy here, I think they're all fighting an uphill battle of not where they want to be. Not where they want to be. I don't know that there's ever a point they're going to come to him and say, look, here's 4 years and 160 guaranteed. That's way more than you get anywhere else. We love you a long time. We're going to give you more than anybody would give you, that he's even really going to believe that once the union's been in his head about this is really sticky for me. And I'm wondering, dude, if there's kumbaya and he's the quarterback in week 1 and everything's cool and they're 4-0 and because he's great, because he is great, I'll hear that if my birthday in October, everything's cool here and number 8's under center and this works.
Right.
This would be a great feat for all of them. And I would applaud it if that happens. It doesn't feel to me, it hasn't smelled to me for the last 120 days like that's what this is. As a professional, as somebody that's done this.
And let's be clear, I'm not saying everything's great or groovy. It's not. But at the same time, you have to look at the reality of where you are. And if there's not, look, deep down, and I don't know this, Nestor, but I think the Ravens, if they got a trade offer, and this is even going back to before the deadline for the franchise tag, if they had gotten a trade offer that would blow them away, I think that, and a team was willing to meet Lamar's contract request, because that clearly would be part of it. Yeah, I think they would have been willing to move on. I don't think that's happening, at least at this point in time. So
And I think
what's your
maybe Eric
alternative
went to
then?
Indianapolis and figured that out, right?
Probably, and that might have something to do with the fact that they gave him the non-exclusive tag. And again, then maybe you wait and see. And if Indianapolis theoretically had been, and they still could be, but if they're a team that would be willing to pony up and pay Lamar what he wants, the fourth overall pick this year and a first round pick next year, or you could work out different draft compensation. You can also have that option as well. But maybe that would be, maybe that maybe the Ravens would deem that good enough. But at the same time, if that market isn't there and there isn't that team that's willing to give him what he wants right now, you're still better off with Lamar Jackson, even if it's not kumbaya, than Baker Mayfield being your quarterback this year. I mean, if you're doing that, for what? You're not beating Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Maybe you can make the playoffs. That's your ceiling. And from that standpoint, I mean, that's where you look at this and say, okay, you can kick the can down the road another year. Again, I'm not saying that's ideal. Let's be clear, when I'm laying this out there, it's where they are. I mean, the fact that they haven't been able to, the fact that they haven't signed an outside free agent a weekend of free and saying, look, the Ravens are never that team that's throwing silly money around at the start of the new league year. But usually a weekend, they've typically signed a guy or two. Maybe it's not a big ticket item like a Marcus Williams, but you've signed a guard. Go back to Kevin Zeitler a couple years ago. You've signed a number 3 wide receiver type. But nothing. I mean, they literally over the first week did not sign an outside free agent, which is it's not unprecedented, but it speaks to where they are right now, because they are in a position where you don't want to be in a position where you can't match Lamar Jackson's offer sheet. If it had been a team that, we talked about this before free agency started, Washington, for example, and it's clear, it seems apparent with them signing Jacoby Brissett that they're not in the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes, and not saying they were going to be, because there had been lots of reports suggesting they weren't going to be. But, that was a team that had a mid first round pick, middle of the first round. That's not good enough for Lamar Jackson. It's just not. So that's where you look at, okay, see if, does he at some point in time, and it might not be this week, but maybe it's a few weeks down the road, or maybe it's come the draft and he sees no teams have signed him to an offer sheet. At some point, does him and the people that are advising him, do they look at this thing and say, okay, maybe the Ravens offer wasn't as bad as we thought? And he comes to that realization. Or does he say, I'm going to bet on myself this year? And whether that's smart financially or not, hey, it's his choice. It's been his choice to not have an agent. It's his prerogative at the end of the day. But does he try to have a better season in this coming year, and then we're doing this thing all over again next year to some shape or form? So it's weird. It's fascinating for people who aren't exhausted by it. Frankly, I'm in the exhausted camp at this point in time. But just because you're tired of it doesn't mean that you just resign yourself to coming up with a less than optimal solution, because again, he's that important, he's that valuable of a player in a vacuum. Again, all the other factors that we talked about that explain this, collusion or non-collusion, it's complicated. I think everyone would agree with that who's actually taken the time to look at this thing. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you just throw in the towel and take any old mediocre compensation for him and move on, because then what? That's when we keep coming back to the argument you and I have had at different times, or debate, I should say, over the last 2 or 3 months, where you say, okay, you move on from Lamar Jackson, what's next? And that's the complicated piece. If deciding you're going to move on, all right, trying to replace him, that's way easier said than done. So that's where we find the Ravens, where even if they were being truthful and saying, yeah, this isn't great, and certainly Lamar Jackson saying the same thing, at the same time, that doesn't mean what's best for them in 2023 at the very least wouldn't be for Lamar Jackson coming back, and both sides kind of counting on the other to be motivated and have a good season and see what happens. If Lamar bets on himself and has his best season since 2019, and the Ravens, let's say they make it to the AFC Championship game at the very least, which would be the first time they've done that in a decade, then maybe we're talking about it in different terms. If Lamar plays all 17 games and plays at a high level, and he looks even better in the Todd Monken offense compared to the Greg Roman offense, and let's say they drafted a wide receiver in the first round that's a legit number one wide receiver, this could be a very different conversation then. And then maybe at that point, maybe Lamar says, I'll do a 3-year fully guaranteed deal. And maybe that's what the best solution would be. I don't know. I'm spitballing here. Clearly, it's tough for us to figure out a solution because, well, the parties that are directly involved in this haven't been able to come up with a solution that's satisfactory to both sides. So, this impasse continues. And as every day that that passes, it feels less and less likely that a team is going to do an offer sheet. I've heard some people talk about, okay, it could come after the draft. I still don't know how that works from a cap standpoint, unless you just have a roster that is that flexible to do that. I mean, the cap dollars are being spent, last week and this week and the week after that. And then after that, you're talking about mostly minimum kind of deals, right? So, if it's not now, then when? And that's where I keep coming back to. It feels more and more like Lamar's going to be here in 2023. I don't know that. I haven't heard that from anyone in the know. That I don't think anyone knows that with 100% certainty. But if a team's not stepping up now, then and the Ravens haven't, it's not as though they went and signed another veteran quarterback or anything. So, it looks like it's going to be Lamar, and I don't know. Maybe they come up with a compromise between now and mid-July for the deadline, or maybe we're talking about this all over again a year from now, which I kind of hope not. I not kind of. I definitely hope not.
Fatigue, he says. Fatigue.
Because I'm fatigued. I absolutely am. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you just throw in the towel and you just say see ya, and you're going to take any old offer for him either. So. We'll see what Lamar has to say with his exclusive interview from his own YouTube channel, which he teased late Saturday night. We'll see if there's anything. I'm not holding my breath that it's going to be anything earth-shattering, but we haven't heard Lamar talk in long form since early December. So we'll see what he has to say, or if there is any newsworthy items to come from that. But otherwise, we're just kind of waiting. And meanwhile, as you've pointed out, those quarterback chairs at places that, quite frankly, in a vacuum, absolutely should want to sign Lamar Jackson. Well, it's not happening. So reality is different from what we think should happen or what could make sense. So we'll see how this continues to play out. But in the meanwhile, it's Groundhog Day all over again.
Well, I know when Chad Steele threw me out of the upper deck and I saved all the money on the season tickets last year, and I have all the money from the flights from Tampa things I didn't use. I decided that I'm going to sign my own free agent quarterback, Luke, here for the offseason. I went out on the eBay and I legitimately got something that I couldn't afford in 1989 when I wanted it. I literally couldn't find it. And if I found it, it would have been $129 then, which I would not have spent because it was officially licensed. So I bought this. This is old school Logo Athletics, 1990 edition. I have a Warren Moon. So
look at that.
So and it fits me. So I've washed it several times. It now smells good enough to wear. And so this is it. I'm going with this. So no matter what, this is what I'm going to be wearing in week 1. Number 1, Warren Moon. So that's it.
Very cool.
I had that for you guys. And I was antiquing in Shrewsbury when I went to the Springsteen show, and I have something for the baseball segment that I'm going to share with you. Luke Jones is here. He will be there. Owings Mills, breaking news. If you're on the WNST tech service, you know all about it. It's all brought to you by Coons Baltimore Ford. Dennis will be here on Thursday. I will be giving away Maryland scratch-offs, and these are the 50th anniversary. We had a bunch of winners when we did it at Drug City a couple weeks ago. We're going to be looking for some winners as well at Costas on the 5th, and then Fadley's on the 7th. Kicking opening day off right, man. I mean, we got Springsteen, we got opening day. We got the 50th anniversary of the Maryland Lottery. We got our friends at Window Nation, 86690 Nation, doing the buy two, get two free in 24 months, 0% financing. Like my windows, like spring. I need an exterminator if anybody's out there. I got to get the spiders and all these crazy things away from me. We're going to get to some baseball because we got opening day. We got World Baseball Classic. We have the eternal debate. Is there's something really more important than the World Series. We'll talk about all that and more. Luke will be with us, and we're going to have a good week around here as we get ready for baseball. We tip our caps to the Maryland Terrapins, and we continue to spin the wheel with the Lamar sweepstakes. He's fatigued. I'm Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Lamar Jackson and Baltimore Positive.